delighted to introduce the Raga, traditional and the contemporary. This session is presented by the Leela Palace, Jaipur. Be it very nature, the Rag promises the immortality of creation, expression, and freedom. The ancient and unparalleled system of ragas provide melodic frameworks that beckon the talents of improvisation and composition and nurture the range complexities of emotions, expression, and metamorphosis. Masters and exponents of Indian classical, contemporary, and genre-defying music come together for a captivating conversation. Violinist, composer, and educator Ambi Subramaniam, Sheykhar Ravjiani, acclaimed music director, producer, and singer, part of the prolific composing duo Vishal-Shekhar, musician, composer, and author Ayaan Ali Bangash, with writer and curator Sadhana Rao, a session on the Raga as it lives in this age of expression. Ambi hailed as the new king of Indian classical violin, and India's Ittazak Perlman has been trained by his father and guru, Dr. L. Subramaniam, since the age of 3 and gave his first stage performance at the age of 7. Sheykhar is India's leading film composer and singer. Along with his partner Vishal, he's created popular soundtracks for over 65 films such as Om Shanti Om, Bachna Sino, and War, among others. Ayaan Ali represents the 7th generation of a musical lineage as son and disciple of Sarod icon Amjad Ali Khan. He has performed across the globe, including prestigious venues like Carnegie Hall, Kennedy Center, Smithsonian, and WOMAD festivals in many continents. Sadhana Rao is a research-led writer and curator in the art and culture spaces. She has written on the art, film festivals, music, crafts, travel, literature, and socio-economic for leading publications. We do have Ayaan's book and he will be signing, so please grab your copies from the bookstore and he'll be signing after the session. There you go.
Thank you for that introduction and a warm welcome to the panelists, a warm welcome to the audience for coming on a Sunday morning to listen to a session on Raga. So thank you for that. I'm just going to set the context for this session as the subject of Rag is a very vast and has absolutely a Himalayan range. Amongst all the art forms and across cultures, the most participatory art form is music making and music listening. And the Indian subcontinent has extremely distinctive, authentic sounds of music. We have the folk music, the motherboard, twin legacies of Carnatic music, of Indian classical music, Carnatic music represented by Ambi, Hindustani, Ayaan, and the phenomenon of the Hindi film song as represented by Sheykhar. In these genres, the nucleus, the fundamental core is the melodic framework or the rag or the sargam. And today, with these brilliant musicians, we're going to delve a little into the fact that there are just 7 notes, but the permutation and combinations of those 7 notes is what creates the magic. So just a session rider, we'll probably begin with an opening score, asking the speakers what their thoughts are on the rag. We'll delve into a deep dive into the architecture of the rag, and then we hear some music. So Ayaan, if I could ask you to strike the opening bars. You know, you represent 7 generations of a very artistic style of sarod playing. You've grown in an immersive environment. What was your do-re-mi moment with a rag, with notes? Was it love at first sight? Was it bewildering? Was it easy? Did it come naturally to you? Just share a little bit of your process.
So, namaskar and a very good morning to all of you. It's a great honor to be here. I'd like to thank the Leela group of hotels for having me here today. So, you know, I mean, you asked so many, it's a very large question that you asked. And I don't know if I'll be able to cover the entire framework because it's so oceanic, the world of music. But I think the main thing is that Indian classical music finds its roots in spirituality in our country. So, we see the evolution as early as, the Samved period and all of that. So that's why to just define a raga, obviously it's a set of ascending and descending notes. But for us as musicians, it's not just a scale. My father says a scale is just like a skeleton. So for us, a raga has a soul. It's like a living entity. It's much more than just a set of ascending and descending notes. Because there are times when my father was teaching me a certain raga, and I would ask him, what is the ascending, descending of this rag? He would say, no, forget the ascending, descending. Understand the ethos of the rag first. Understand iska mahol samjho. Understand the atmosphere of the rag. So these things, with time, you adapt, you listen, you observe, you do your research, and the learning never stops. I think till the last day you walk the planet, the learning just doesn't stop. So that's why we have ragas. We have so many ragas, and it's not possible to perhaps play all even in one lifetime.
Sure.
But it's an oceanic world. That's all I can say.
Ambi, you represent the Carnatic tradition, and like Ayaan, you share your father's legacy, your grandfather's legacy. You have your legacy from your mother. What has been your musical odyssey? You've learned the violin, you've learned Western classical music, you've learned the violin in both forms. Just give us a peek into how you approach, how do you view and share with the audience what you think is a rag.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. For me, actually, I think I was very lucky to kind of have the upbringing that I did, where, of course, my father is a great classical musician, but he had never kind of made these strict boundaries on anything. So, of course, there was a lot of classical music at home, and I still consider Carnatic violin my mother tongue. But having said that, one day there was a jazz musician at home. One day there was an African musician at home. One day there was a Chinese musician at home. So it was really interesting for me to learn Carnatic classical music with that context. So for me, I think my definition of a rag has kind of changed over time. I think initially when I was taught that as a child, it would be a very basic skeleton, and my dad was always very kind of focused on what you bring to the table as an individual. So initially, I would try to do my own things. I'm sure a lot of them were technically wrong at that point, but he would never really worry too much about that, as long as you're kind of bringing your own ideas. And then over a period of time, say once I've learned a little bit about the rag, then I would go to him and say, okay, this feels wrong. What I'm playing, why does this phrase feel wrong? And then he would tell me, actually, see, this approach that you're doing doesn't really fit in here. So you kind of, over a period of time, you listen to a lot of great artists, you listen to a lot of different compositions, improvisations of the same rag. And then you start realizing, okay, fine, this doesn't fit in to the emotion of the rag. Maybe technically this makes sense. Technically, according to the Arohanam, Avrohanam, this makes sense, but it doesn't quite fit. And then you start thinking about that. And then I think now my approach is very different. Like Bai said, it's not only about that, it's about the emotion, what you're trying to kind of add to that. So for me, that makes a big difference when you're trying to approach a rag, you're trying to see how you're bringing the emotion, how to bring the color that you want to bring while maintaining that kind of structure that so many amazing musicians have provided over the years.
So hold that thought, we'll revisit it. Shekhar, if I segue to you, you represent a music genre which is so expansively heard, the phenomenon of the Hindi film song. But you've taken, to share with the audience, Shekhar's father was an accordion player by choice, and he gave his love for music to Shekhar. sorry, accordion player. And so you've learned both. You've learned your talim in Hindustani classical music from Faiz Ahmad Khan Saab, and you've learned from Xavier Fernandez, you've learned the Western classical. What does your score sheet look when you approach the notes, the sargam? Of course, it's about really, rag in Sanskrit means rang. It means color, it means emotions. And these 7 notes are only doing that. It's just texturing and layering the emotions. So give us a peek into what your score sheet looks like. सोचते कैसे हैं आप?
जी मैं बताता हूँ आपसे. Namaskar everybody. Thank you Jaipur Lit Fest. Thank you Sanjoy, Shams, Shweta. All you beautiful people here on Sunday morning. Thank you so much for coming for this session, and thank you Sadhana ji for doing this. I think राग के बारे में बातचीत थोड़ी बहुत कम होती है, लेकिन आप जिस तरह से आप सवाल पूछ रहे हैं, हमारे लिए तो ये समंदर है. It's an ocean for us. How do we answer? And thank you for making me meet both of them. I really was looking forward to meeting the both of you. You guys are fantastic, and I think a lot of our generation looks up to you guys. And huge round of applause for both of them and Sadhana ji, please. Thank you.
And likewise.
And likewise.
It's such a pleasure to meet Sheykhar Bhai. I think musically we are all connected, but I think physically we are all meeting for the first time. Yes.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm blessed. Honestly, I'm blessed because I can't do anything else except music. I'm blessed because I wake up in the morning and what I understand, what I kind of relate to, what I feel, I laugh, I cry, I smile, is through music. Very few people are blessed like that. I'm blessed to have parents who are pitch perfect and fantastic at,
Round of applause for that.
Yeah. My mother sings really well, but not professionally. My father plays the accordion really well, not professionally. We're from a business family. And my dad learned from Gudi Sirvai. And I was very fortunate कि जब मैंने उनसे कहा कि मुझे सीखना है. So I got both the worlds. I got Indian classical also, and at the same time, I learned the piano from Xavier Fernandez sir. Niyaz Ahmed Khan साहब ने मुझे तालीम दी. Jagjit Singh साहब ने मुझे तालीम दी. I was very, very fortunate that I spent so much time with them. And to come back to how I sketched this entire thing, what does my book look like? The thing is, for me, rag is an emotion. और रागों के बारे में इनसे बेहतर तो मैं नहीं बता सकता. मैं आपको इतना गारंटी दे सकता हूँ. Ayaan and Ambi can tell you more about that thing. But what I can tell you is when I start a composition, there is a rag playing in my head. अब वो राग का नाम क्या है मुझे नहीं पता. जब बनाता हूँ उसके बाद लोग कहते हैं कि this song takes us to a bahar. This song takes us to a ginger tea.
You're dipping into the same emotion. Ocean.
It's an emotion. It's an emotion because it's कहते हैं सुबह सुबह उठ के भैरव गाया जाता है, वो सुना जाता है. But how you bring it into the modern form of music? How do you kind of make it? How do you make it interesting for the youth today? Like my daughter's 19 years old, and when she listens to classical music, she might think differently of classical music. She might not really understand the essence behind it, but when I put that in a film song, when I can, for example, Jag Ghumya Thare Jaisa Na Koi, ye bahar hai aur uska ek, for me, it's a song called Yara Silly Silly, which I had heard in a film called Lekin. Uske jo notes hai, Sare ma pa ni sa ni pa ma re ni sa re ma re sa. ये जो राग है वो इतना पता है, लेकिन सारे सारे मा पा नि सा नि पा ma re sa इतना पता है कि ये इसमें बना था वो गाना यारा सिली सिली.
It's rag mand, if I'm not mistaken.
नहीं, ये बहार है और I think मिश्रण है इसमें थोड़ा. So when this happened, there was a film called Sultan we were working on. So there was a song called Jag Ghumya. Jag Ghumya Thare Jaisa Na Koi. तो वो सेम राग को यहाँ कैसे अलग प्रोडक्शन के साथ अलग तरीके से पेश करना है. And I think that got accepted really well. So I think knowledge of classical music comes from all the legends who've performed, recorded, played, all the music composers in the film industry who've used all the Indian classical ragas so beautifully in the composition starting 1940, 1950s, where classical raga based songs were more than what they are today. Koshish yahi hai ki I just try and spread classical music as much as possible.
Great.
I would just like to pitch in here, in addition to what Sheykhar Bhai said, is that, you see, a raga is not defined also by the duration you play it for. I mean, today, obviously everyone is becoming more and more precise. But even back in the day, when the world of EPs were there, those EPs, not the new EPs, all those superstars of classical music recorded one raga only for 3 minutes. It was a technical issue. They could not record for more than 3 minutes. But their genius and that raga, that structure, it came out in 3 minutes. So you really don't have to improvise for an hour, hour and a half. Many times the musician is just making himself happy. That, oh, I can improvise so well, or I can. But if you actually analyze after the first 20 minutes, is there repetition happening? Is this a logical duration for this rag? Many ragas are limited. Something like, say, rag, Kamod. It's a beautiful rag, but can you play it for 2 hours? Are you doing anything new after 45 minutes? Da, ra, da, e, re, ra, da, ra, da, ra, ra, de, ra, ra, re, ra, re, ta, ra, ra. अब ये limited rag है. Now, 2 घंटे you can go on, but only the artist is making himself happy, pleasing their own ego, maybe.
That's a very interesting point you make, giving a toss to the concept of time, that, time is not important. So thank you for your opening remarks. That was very interesting. And as they say etymologically, that a rag is always said, Ranjayati itiya raga. That is, whatever has an aesthetic pleasure and a notation, it becomes a rag. So building on the theme of what Ayaan and Sheykhar have said, Ambi, if I can come to you, Carnatic music has had a history of and a love for codification. So the rags in Carnatic music have this gigantic cycle called the Melakarta system, which I'm told Ambi mastered by the age of 10, which is a huge round of applause. That's what your father said. So you witness to that, yeah. So you have, while this strict, I know musicians want to give a toss to rigidity and structures, but this rigidity allowed for the instrument that you play, which is the piano, to come into the 18th century to Carnatic music, right? With this rigidity, you have somebody like Dr. Subramaniam and yourselves who've given a toss to the way the violin is played. You've innovated there. Like the violin played in the Carnatic system is down, whereas in the Western classical tradition, so you've borrowed that. And the gamakas, the oscillations, the ornamentation come equally good. You have people like Bala Murli Krishna, who have given a toss to the rag grammar. The rag has a grammar, it must have except notes, it must have ascending order. He's gone ahead and made a rag with just 3 notes. We see a lot of innovation in your work. How do you weigh in the tradition and the contemporary, which is the theme of today's talk?
Well, I think a couple of things there. First of all, I don't think I'm a master at anything right now, let alone when I was 10. But I think one thing that sometimes goes unnoticed is classical music is ever evolving. And there are so many amazing composers of classical music today. And generally when we talk about classical music, we talk about 200 years old, 300 years old, 500 years old. But like you were saying, there were amazing musicians like Balamurali Krishna, G. N. Balasubramaniam, so many amazing artists who within the same structure have created so many amazing things and have added their own individuality. I think with my father also, he was very, very fascinated by other styles of music as well. And I think one thing that he's done beautifully is try to bring everything together. So that's something that he's kind of taught me, and that's something that I try to do. Where if I'm kind of listening to another style of music, or if I'm listening to another violinist, I try to see how that can be adapted into my playing. I've kind of tried to do that a lot. I remember when kind of I released my first album. Um, what I used to do is every day I would listen to a violinist of another genre, and try to see where I was kind of lacking in a violinistic kind of way, or a musical way. So then I realized, okay, fine. This piece that I'm doing in Kamboji would sound so much better if I am using dynamics the way this Russian violinist is kind of using, or the way this Hungarian gypsy violinist is playing. When I play speed, I can try this to get a little more clarity. So then you try to use all these learnings in a different way, and then you realize that also when you talk about raga and tala, it is a structure that is kind of created. So you can also create structures like that. So you learn how to kind of take these structures and make your own. So that's kind of been of a great interest to me. So when we're trying to create these new structures, you realize, okay, you set the rules, you set kind of the boundaries, and you can kind of have fun with it and take it where you want.
Wonderful. That's a compelling narrative. Ayaan, how do you approach, aesthetics always comes with some architecture. You have in the Hindustani Paddhati, you have Bhatkandeji's third system, you have the Samay Chakra, and as I mentioned, that each rag comes with its set of notes. What works with your compositional logic? You've done some fantastic work with Moksh, with Remembering Gandhi. There is the fundamentals of classicism there, but it's got your individuality too.
You see, because classical music was always an oral tradition, there was never a rule book on how classical music should be presented. So every era kind of had its own interpretation of classical music. What we hear today by all the legends, by even the younger musicians, is what's happening in the scene today. Everyone has adapted to the changing times. There's nothing right or wrong. It's because, in the creative world, nothing is right or wrong. But I think music is who we are as people. Our nature reflects onto our music. I could be taught a rag, Ambi bhai could be taught a rag, Sheykhar bhai would approach something in a certain way. But eventually, who we are as people, what our journey is, our highs, our lows, our happy moments, our sad moments, all of that executes in our music. And that's how an artist makes it their own. So obviously we follow rule books, yes, but people like my father, or even Ambi bhai's father, these were, legends who thought outside the box. They broke the rules. I mean, and they allowed us as students to listen to everyone and to observe and take what is beautiful and what works. They were not, back in the day, some gurus were rigid that only listen to this, only listen to that, do not hear this, do not hear that. So by the end of it, gharana is a very great word, but it's also another word of limitation, right? Ki aap ye hi kariye, ye mat kariye. Lekin, like I said, I think our nature reflects, and you have to eventually make it your own, and that your journey makes you do that.
That's a very democratic statement you've made, because actually All India Radio came and gave a real toss to gharanas. What was normally kept rigidly in one house just got, free for all with All India Radio. Sheykhar, if we were to illustrate one of your works, which is Jhankar Beats, path-breaking music, in terms of an ode to a seasoned veteran musician, R.D. Burman, yet with complete stamp of originality. As you rightly said, Naushad Ji, S.D. Burman, films like Pakiza, Guide, Beju Bavra have had such a deep placing of the rag. You were mentioning that in today's world, you stick by your classical mode. What's your canvas like in because a song, the Hindi film song, is such an important part. It's the internal monologue which the actor or the writer, what can't be said in dialogue, is said through music.
So just to answer your question, I was very close to Ayaan Bhai's thought, which was about Gharana, about limitations. Just wanted to continue from there. And I personally feel that prayers are the same. We all pray differently, right? We have our own way of praying. वो कुछ चीज जो होती है वो हम अपना बना लेते हैं, and that's why I think the individuality comes in very strongly in the form of our music, right?
Nicely said.
I think the thing is after, so as I told you, I've been blessed with listening to Pancham Das music at home, and at the same time Beatles were playing at home. So and then Indian classical and then Western classical at the same time. And then I started doing film music, and then I felt like a restaurant. I have different cuisines. You know, there's dance music, there's ballads, there's a classical thumri happening, there's an orchestral piece happening, and suddenly you are kind of, whatever you absorbed from listening to others, you're kind of putting it into your form of music. Luckily, Jhankar Beats was a tribute to Pancham Da, and there, the effort for us was to kind of go completely original, but touch that little point where I think every one of us have loved Pancham Da for, you know, his style of his bass parts, his style of guitars, his style of chords, his style of compositions, his style of getting singers to sing, his style of him singing. That was something really, really unique. So I think that's something we got to play along with. And just not Jhankar Beats, but lots of other soundtracks. When you hear of Vishal-Shekhar, you will hear a very strong classical bass also, and at the same time you'll hear something which is electronic, something which is orchestral, something which is rock, metal. And as I said, we're blessed with kind of having friends and people in the industry who've been doing different kind of things. Can't structure something because everything is flowing in your head, everything is floating in your head. You start to make a song, or you start with Yaman, for example, or वहाँ नी को अगर कोमल कर दिया तो वाचस्पति हो जाता है. तो ये you start playing, you're not going somewhere down the line. Someone says you've started with Yaman, but you've gone somewhere else. But there are no rules, right? You can go wherever you want to go, as long as you feel it here. And when you feel it strongly, then people feel it. That's what I feel. Yeah.
So a little bit of stage time right now. Let's see what we've been discussing. Let's see how we put it into the sound, because what is music but not an alchemy of sounds? So which of you would like to go first? Yeah. No, you're not jamming together. Each one can do what you want. You want to jam together?
See, we can do anything.
Yeah, please.
आप चिंता ना करें. Ambi, आप शुरू करें, please. हाँ, 100%.
This is a premiere happening right now. But what, again, I would say what Sheykhar Bhai was also saying, you see, when you're wearing a composer's hat, then, that's a different world. I mean, obviously, you have to keep in mind what the lyrics are asking for. I mean, that's also, I think, very important. कि
भाई बिल्कुल सही है, but the thing is, classical music में अगर lyrics भी ना हो तो आप emotion feel कर सकते हैं, and that's the most beautiful thing. It's just like an instrument playing or someone just doing an alap or anything. It just comes and makes you cry, and just like makes you smile, makes you feel so special that you're hearing something. You know,
would have a brief.
a director, yeah, and you are actually brought into a project to kind of translate the vision of a director, and there you have the liberty to do some stuff, but you still have to keep it with the narrative of the film. So as a composer, it's different, but as a student of Niyaz Ahmed Khan साहब, 3 साल तो मैंने यमन सीखा और 3 साल मैंने तोड़ी सीखा, बस ये 2 राग सीखे और नहीं सीखा कुछ भी. लेकिन ये 6 साल में सब कुछ ऐसा लगा कि पूरा समंदर मेरा हो गया.
But music is too generous a subject to know hierarchies. उसमें कोई क्या बड़ा है क्या छोटा है वो
बस
तो
रूल्स ब्रेक करते रहो और आपका नाम होते रहेगा, बस ऐसा है.
और जिसने किया है ये उसका है. Without रियाज there's nothing.
और एक चीज मेरे खान साहब कहा करते थे बिफोर वी गेट टू हियर सम ब्यूटीफुल म्यूजिक, कि जो इल्म होता है ना, जो नॉलेज होता है ना, वो बांटने से बढ़ता है. तो जितना जितना हो सके नॉलेज बांटना चाहिए. यू शुड शेयर नॉलेज, इट विल जस्ट ग्रो. एंड दैट्स व्हाट माय खान साहब यूज्ड टू से, उस्ताद नियाज़ अहमद खान साहब.
Ambi, tell us, what are you playing?
I don't really know.
So just music.
Maybe we'll start playing and we'll do something together.
Keys, Isha?
अहिर भैरव में हेलो हेलो चेक वो ये गाना याद आ गया अलबेला सजन आयो रे अलबेला सजन पायो रे अलबेला सजन आयो रे
Gama bada nida, nida bada, re da ni sa da ni da bada ma ni da bada ni ba ni da ma da ba ba ga ba ma ma ri ma ga ga da. E no re re da ra no.
I think what you saw just now was probably the best definition of tradition and contemporary in one classical continuum. And probably the fact that music really knows no boundaries and knows no borders, no language. It is universal. Thank you so much. As Ayaan said, that was a premiere of an album that just came on Jaipur Music Stage. Should we, how are we doing on time? Should we open the round to Q&A? All of you. Excellent. I think they're raising their hands. Sure, I.
So check. Morning. My name is Sheykhar without the Y. My name is Sheykhar without the Y. The question is this: that both the violin and the sarod are fretless instruments, unlike the sitar and the esraj, which have frets. So, in the interpretation of the raga, between how in a fretless instrument and a fretted instrument, particularly if you have to do the gayaki, many instrumentalists have actually learned instrument from vocalists rather than from people who actually played on the instruments. So I just wanted to, the question is, how does the use of fretless instrument versus fretted instruments work in the way that a raga interpretation actually plays itself out?
You know, recently on a lighter note, someone sent me a t-shirt. It said, be a sarod, don't fret. So the thing is, violin and sarod both, you know, they don't have frets. We are, you know, sliding and gliding on a fingerboard. Sarod, the main difference between violin and sarod is also that sarod is played with the finger nails. If we play sarod with the fingertip, the sound is flat. So we are playing with the edge of our nails. So our life is incomplete without the nail file and Revlon also. But it's challenging because there's no sign. From when you go from re to ga, ga to ni to dha, you know, you're going by you just have to listen. Little bit up and down, wo besura ho jayega. So that's why वो कहते हैं बेपर्दे साज हैं, बजाने वाले को, you know, इस साज में पर्दा नहीं है, बजाने वाला बेपर्दा हो सकता है. So it's all practice and accuracy. Ambi bhai, something you can add?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point, for the violin as well, most of them are handmade. So suddenly if I have to switch to another violin, I'll be completely out of tune. So there is a little bit of muscle memory there. But to answer your second point about learning from a vocalist, I mean, I did also learn singing, and that of course helps my violin playing. But for an instrument, it's also important to learn the technique of that particular instrument. So while you're trying to, I mean, all of our kritis and compositions in Carnatic music are basically vocal compositions. But then when you improvise, it's also important to bring out the beauty of each instrument. So there, it is important to spend time and learn the instrument's technique, capabilities, and all of that. So you try to have a mix of that vocal style, but also bring out the beauty of each instrument.
Like the differences of nuances even in voice, right?
Absolutely.
I think there's a lady there. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for that wonderful session. My question is that when you are breaking the rules in that moment, are you following your vision or are you thinking about the rules that you're breaking? And or do you like take stock of what you have broken after you have followed your vision? How do you decide that it's okay to break these rules? Like, how do you decide that?
Hello. Hi. So I've started my career by breaking rules. In a sense, I've started my career by देखिए एक तहजीब जो हम शब्द इस्तेमाल करते हैं और जब हम तालीम लेते हैं गुरुजी से तो हमें कहा जाता है कि ये राग का आरोह है, इनको फॉलो किया जाए, which there is a lot of purity in that form. But chordally and compositionally, if you try and innovate a little, you move away from that instruction. And as I say, as a musician, if it feels good, it feels good. You know what I'm saying? If anything, you go away from the normal way of putting something together, it goes out of the boundaries of what we've been taught, then you create something which is new. You create something which is different. And Sangeet mein rules hi nahi hai. It's like the boundaries are all melted now. Everything is like, it's totally melted. Everyone is doing everything and it's sounding gorgeous, you know.
And I think also when you are working on something, you know, things happen. I don't think you sit down ki aaj main kuch alag karunga. Yeah, I want to do this today. Things just happen. It's the requirement of what you're working for, and it's an organic thing. It just happens. You know, जो कहते हैं ना, फिल्में अच्छी फिल्में बनाते नहीं हैं, बन जाती हैं. So it's one of those things, you know.
Absolutely. And I think when you're ideating, you kind of want to make sure you don't have too many structures. And then later you probably listen back and reflect and see, okay, does this actually make sense, or is this irrelevant, or should I remove this? So I think that process comes later, and then you decide, okay, we should keep this or let's not keep this.
Which is what game changers and innovators do, you know, master the rule book and then see exit points to break it. I hope that answers your question.
Hi.
Somebody's been raising their hands here. Go ahead, and then we'll come here.
Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you so much. First of all, it's a rare occasion to see Hindustani classical music sitting with the Carnatic classical music practitioner in today's India. My question is, long back, Vidushi Leela Bhagwat was with Vidushi Aruna Sairam to do a Samantar event where they perform the same raga in both the traditions. And for listeners like us, we think that Carnatic and Hindustani classical music are very different because they had different social history. So I wanted to have your opinion on how both these traditions are similar or different in their approach to a rag. Thank you.
That to Ambi? Is that question directed to all?
Well, I think, first of all, the origin is the same. So it all originated from one style of music and became all these beautiful separate things initially. And I think when you talk about styles of music, when you talk about all of this, there are so many similarities and differences even within any classical music form. So if you take two Carnatic musicians as well, there will be so many individual kind of brilliant things that they're bringing to the table. And I think nowadays we are kind of fortunate to be in a generation where there has been so many of these collaborations. So when we kind of are sitting with people from different styles of music, there is a kind of a little bit of knowledge. There is, of course, I've never learned Hindustani music traditionally, but I've listened to so many great artists. So I think that all of that really helps. So ultimately, when you're trying to make music together, it's about what you're trying to create together, and you're not really worried too much about similarities or differences. But as a musician, as a composer, you try to see how everyone in that kind of collaboration can bring their own beautiful style, and how you try to make one piece of music that makes sense as a whole.
As a practicing researcher, it's music to my ears when we have somebody in the audience asking a question, because I think in that same concert, which carried on to Chennai, had an Italian singer doing the aria, and she combined it with Italian folk song. The Hindustani musician took Bilawal. The equal in Carnatic music is Sheykhar Ravjiani, and we don't know what scale she took. There was not one wrong note. So thank you for your question. There's somebody this side asking me the mic.
मैं हिंदी में पूछूंगा।
जरूर, आपके लिए।
श्रीनिवास बात कर रहा हूँ, अयान अली जवाब दे तो बहुत अच्छा रहेगा। ओशो ने एक जगह कहा है कि जो भी संगीत का परफॉर्मर है, चाहे वो वोकल सिंगर हो या इंस्ट्रूमेंटल प्लेयर हो, वो सभी रागों के जरिए, अपनी रचनाओं के जरिए शुद्ध संगीत खोजता रहता है, प्योर म्यूजिक। ही इज इन सर्च ऑफ प्योर म्यूजिक। ओशो कहते हैं जिस क्षण, जिस दिन उसे ये प्योर म्यूजिक, शुद्ध संगीत मिल जाता है, या तो अगर वो इंस्ट्रूमेंट बजाने वाला कोई परफॉर्मर है तो वो इंस्ट्रूमेंट तोड़ देगा, उसको टच नहीं करेगा। अगर वो गायक है तो वो मौन में चला जाएगा। क्या शास्त्रीय संगीत के बारे में ओशो ने ये जो कहा है, मैं तो बहुत कंफ्यूज्ड हूँ। आप कुछ रोशनी डाल सकते हैं? थैंक यू।
सो मैं जो समझा, आप ये कह रहे हैं जिस दिन उनको लगे कि वो मतलब संगीत में वो पहुंच गए, मोक्ष मिल गया, तो उस दिन छोड़ देंगे, आप ये कह रहे हैं। ये हो जाए तो बहुत बड़ी चीज है, लेकिन हमारे पिताजी कहते हैं वो आज भी साधक है और आज भी स्टूडेंट है, तो उस हिसाब से तो हम लोग का जन्म ही नहीं हुआ। तो बहुत लंबी यात्रा है ये, इट्स जन्मों का यात्रा है। बस हर कलाकार को क्रिएटिव मोक्ष मिल जाए, वो आशीर्वाद है फिर।
Thank you so much to the audience, and thank you so much to the panelists for such a lovely discussion. We're completely out of time. Until next time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ambi, Sheykhar, Ayaan at Sadhana. Listening to you, we heard a symphony, and it's not just that we heard a symphony. There are some 7-8-year-olds out here who trooped in. While you were performing, they listened. When the question answer began, they started their own music. Are you okay with the quick snap with these small ones? Because you drew them in, we didn't. Can you just get them in quickly? And they heard you in rapt attention. उसके बाद इन्होंने अपनी म्यूजिक शुरू करी।